The distress signal had been repeating for 40 years. Lieutenant Hiro Tanaka almost missed it. The frequency was ancient, buried beneath layers of cosmic static that modern sensors usually filtered out. But something made him pause, made him run the signal through the old compatibility protocols that nobody used anymore. When the translation came through, his blood went cold. "This is Mirati Station 7. We are dying. Please remember us kindly." Captain Nadia Okonkwo was in her quarters when Hiro called her to the bridge. She arrived within minutes, her gray hair still wet from the shower, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. The crew of the Remembrance watched as she listened to the signal 3 times without speaking. The Mirati had been extinct for 15 years. Before that, they had been dying for decades. And before that, 40 years ago, they had done something that humanity had never forgotten. They had saved the human race that Nadia's grandmother had been 7 years old during the colony collapse of 2089. 12 human colony worlds had failed simultaneously. Crops died. Water systems failed. Children starved by the thousands while the great powers of the galaxy watched and did nothing. The hegemony had called it natural selection. The other species had called it not their concern. But the Mirati came, a dying race with barely enough ships to save themselves. They gave away their agricultural vessels, their seed vaults, their medical technology. They fed human children with food meant for Mirati children. They chose to accelerate their own extinction so that strangers might live. They asked for nothing in return except one thing: remember us kindly. Humanity had remembered. "Set course for those coordinates," Nadia said quietly. "Maximum speed." The station was exactly where the signal said it would be. It hung in the darkness like a skeleton, its lights long dead, its hull scarred by decades of micrometeor impacts. The Remembrance approached slowly, sensors scanning for any sign of life. There was none. And yet the signal still played. Hiro led the boarding team personally. 6 humans in environmental suits, carrying lights and medical equipment, stepping into corridors that had not seen movement in 4 decades. The air was thin but breathable. The gravity was weak but present. Someone had designed this station to survive. They found bodies first. Mirati remains preserved by the cold and the vacuum. Adults, mostly. They had died at their posts, maintaining systems, keeping something alive. Keeping someone alive. The stasis chamber was in the deepest section of the station, protected by 3 backup power systems that had somehow kept running for 40 years. Inside, suspended in pale blue light, was a Mirati child. She was small. Perhaps 8 years old by human standards, though Mirati aged differently. Her skin was the pale silver that Nadia remembered from old photographs. Her 4 arms were folded across her chest. Her eyes were closed, but her vital signs were stable. A note was attached to the chamber. Handwritten. Mirati script that Hiro's translator took a moment to process it. Her name is Suri. She is our daughter. We could not save our people, but perhaps we could save her. We gave everything we had to help the humans. Perhaps they will remember. Perhaps they will be kind. Nadia read the note 3 times. Then she gave the order to extract the stasis chamber and bring it aboard the Remembrance. No one questioned her. No one needed to. They were halfway back to human space when the Hegemony patrol vessel arrived. The Arbiter of Law was 3 times the size of the Remembrance, bristling with weapons that could reduce a human ship to atoms in seconds. Its commander, Coordinator Vrel of the Sethani species, appeared on the view screen with the cold efficiency of a bureaucrat performing routine work. Human vessel Remembrance. Our sensors indicate you have recovered biological material from a derelict station. Under Hegemony Salvage Protocol 7, all unclaimed biological material in neutral space is property of the Hegemony. You will surrender the material immediately. Nadia stood very still. The material you're referring to is a child. A Mirati child. The last of her kind. Vrel's expression did not change. The Mirati are extinct. Their genetic material has been classified as salvage. You will comply. And if we do not, then you'll be in violation of hegemony law. Your ship will be impounded. Your crew will be detained. The biological material will be confiscated and processed according to standard protocols. Processed. The word hung in the air like poison. Nadia thought of her grandmother. She thought of 12 million humans who had survived because a dying race chose kindness over survival. She thought of a note written by parents who had given away everything, hoping that strangers would remember. Coordinator Vrel, she said slowly, I'm invoking humanitarian protection under Earth law. This child is now under human jurisdiction. She will not be surrendered. Vrel stared at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time, something like confusion crossed his features. You would defy the hegemony? For this? For one child of a dead race? Nadia smiled. It was not a warm smile. The Mirati saved us. We remember. She cut the transmission before Vrel could respond. Then she opened a channel to Earth. This is Captain Nadia Okonkwo of the Remembrance. We have found a Mirati survivor. The hegemony wants to take her. I need to speak to Fleet Command immediately. The response came within seconds. The face on the screen was old, weathered, and absolutely serious. Admiral Yusuf Osei had been born during the colony collapse. His mother had been saved by Mirati medicine when she was 8 months pregnant. Without the Mirati, he would never have existed. Tell me everything, he said, and Nadia did. Coordinator Vrel had served the hegemony for 60 years. He had enforced salvage laws on 100 worlds. He had never once encountered resistance. Until now. The human captain had cut his transmission, simply ended it, as if his authority meant nothing. Vrel sat in his command chair aboard the arbiter of law, trying to process what had just happened. They refused, he said to his second officer. They actually refused. Humans are known to be emotional, the officer replied. They will see reason once we demonstrate our capabilities. Vrel nodded slowly. Yes, that was the logical approach. A show of force. Humans were a minor species with a small fleet. They could not possibly sustain defiance against the hegemony. He ordered 3 additional enforcement vessels to his position. Meanwhile, 12 light years away, Earth was waking up. Admiral Yusuf Osei had not slept in 30 hours. The moment Captain Okonkwo's message reached Fleet Command, he had begun making calls. To Parliament, to the historical archives, to every surviving witness of the colony collapse who could still speak. The story spread faster than any official transmission could have carried it. A Mirati child had been found. The last one, and the hegemony wanted to take her. Within hours, the streets of Earth's major cities were filled with people. Not protesters, not activists, just people, standing, waiting, holding photographs of Mirati faces that their grandparents had kept for 40 years. In Beijing, an old woman played a Mirati lullaby on a traditional flute. She had learned it as a child, taught by a Mirati healer who had saved her village. In Lagos, a school choir sang songs in the Mirati language. They had been singing them for generations, keeping the words alive. In Buenos Aires, a man stood outside Parliament holding a single sign. It read, "They saved my mother. Now we save their child." Speaker Amara Diallo convened Parliament in emergency session. The chamber was full. Every representative, every observer, every citizen who could fit through the doors. The atmosphere was not angry. It was something deeper, something older. Amara stood at the podium and opened a document that had not been read in public for 20 years. This is the record of gratitude, she said. It contains the names of every human saved by Mirati intervention during the colony collapse of 2089. She began to read. The names went on for 6 hours. 12 million of them. Children who had been fed, sick who had been healed, desperate who had been given hope. 12 million humans who had lived because a dying race chose to be kind. When the last name was read, Amara looked up at the assembly. These are our people, she said. These names are our history. And the race that saved them asked us for one thing. They asked us to remember them kindly. She paused. There's a child in space right now. She is the last of her people. Her parents gave everything they had to save us, and then they put her in stasis, hoping that someday someone would find her. Someone who would remember. Her voice hardened. The hegemony has declared this child to be salvage. Property. They want to take her and process her according to standard protocols. They believe we will comply because we are small, because we are weak, because we do not matter. Amara leaned forward. Let us show them what it means to matter. The vote was unanimous. Not a single dissent. Not a single abstention. The Parliament of Earth formally extended citizenship to Suri of the Mirati. She was no longer an orphan. She was human. More than that, they invoked the Debt Covenant, an ancient principle older than space travel, older than nations. Debts of life must be repaid, across generations if necessary, across centuries if required. The Mirati had given humanity life. Now humanity would give the Mirati a future. Admiral Osei transmitted the response himself. He wanted Coordinator Vrel to see his face, to understand that this was not a negotiation. Coordinator Vrel, the Parliament of Earth has granted citizenship to the Mirati child you have classified as salvage. She is now a citizen of the human species, entitled to all protections under our law. He leaned closer to the camera. Any attempt to take her will be considered an act of war against humanity. We do not make this declaration lightly. We make it because we have no choice. The Mirati saved us when no one else would. We will not abandon their child. Vrel watched the transmission with growing disbelief. This was madness. Humans had perhaps 200 warships. The hegemony had thousands. They could not possibly be serious. You would risk war, he demanded. For one child? For a dead race that has been extinct for 15 years. Osei's response was quiet and absolute. We would risk everything, because that is what the Mirati did for us. They risked everything. They gave everything. And we remember. The transmission ended. Vrel sat in silence for a long moment. Then he opened a channel to Sethan Prime. The hegemony's ruling council needed to know what was happening. Humans, it seemed, were not like other species. They did not forget, and they did not let go. Point 4 enforcement vessels were now in position around the Remembrance. Captain Okonkwo had not moved. She simply waited, her small ship surrounded by enemies, a sleeping child in her cargo hold. She was not afraid. She knew help was coming, because humanity always remembered its debts. Always. The Hall of Coordination had not seen this much chaos in 300 years. Point 12 beings sat at a curved table made of polished stone from a dozen worlds. They were the coordinators, the rulers of the hegemony, the voices that commanded 1,000 species across 10,000 systems. They did not raise their voices. They did not argue. They governed through cold logic and absolute authority. Today they were shouting. This is absurd. Coordinator Vrel's hologram declared from across the stars. I have 4 enforcement vessels surrounding a single human ship. They cannot resist. They must not resist. If we allow this defiance to stand, every minor species in the galaxy will believe they can challenge us. Then why are you calling us? Coordinator Drath of the Violini demanded. Seize the ship. Take the biological material. End this. Because they have declared war. Silence fell over the hall. Va? Coordinator Mirren of the Olati spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, her silver eyes unreadable. Humans have declared war over one child. They have invoked something called a debt covenant, Vrel explained. They claim the Mirati saved their species 40 years ago, and that they are obligated to protect the last survivor. They are treating this as a matter of species honor. Drath made a sound of disgust. Species honor. How primitive. The Mirati are extinct. Their genetic material has no value. This entire situation could be resolved in minutes if you would simply act. I agree, said Coordinator Thull of the hegemony's military arm. Dispatch a battle group. 20 ships should be sufficient. Destroy the human vessel if they resist. Capture it if they surrender. Either way, retrieve the salvage and remind these humans of their place. The motion was about to pass when Mirren raised her hand. I would speak against this action. The other coordinators turned to look at her. The Olati were traders, merchants, beings of commerce rather than war. Mirren's opinion carried weight in economic matters, but this was a military question. Speak, said Coordinator First, the ancient being who led the council. Mirren stood. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if every gesture was calculated. I have traded with humans for 30 years. My ships have visited their worlds. My merchants have eaten at their tables. I know this species in ways that none of you do. She looked at each coordinator in turn. They're not like us. They form bonds that transcend logic. They remember kindness across generations. They remember cruelty even longer. Their history is filled with wars fought over insults from centuries past. They have monuments to allies who died 1,000 years ago. She paused. The Mirati saved them. This is not a political claim to humans. It is a religious truth. They have named ships after Mirati heroes. They have taught their children Mirati songs. They have built temples to honor a dying race that chose to help them when no one else would. What is your point? Drath interrupted. They are sentimental. So what? Sentiment does not win wars. No, Mirren agreed. But conviction does. And humans are not defying us for the child. They are defying us because they cannot do otherwise. For them, abandoning the last Mirati would be like abandoning their own souls. She sat back down. Send your battle group if you wish. You will take the child. You may even destroy the human fleet. But you will not destroy what drives them. And they will never stop coming. They will never stop remembering. They will spend 1,000 years finding ways to hurt us, because that is what humans do to those who harm what they love. Coordinator first considered her words for a long moment. Then he made his decision. The battle group will proceed. 20 ships. Standard enforcement protocol. If humans wish to fight, we will show them the cost of defiance. Mirren said nothing more. She had given her warning. It was not her fault if they refused to hear it. The battle group departed from Sethan Prime within hours. 20 warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, carrying enough firepower to devastate a world. They moved through hyperspace in perfect formation, confident in their superiority. They emerged at the edge of human territory, expecting to find a single ship surrounded by 4 patrol vessels. What they found was something else entirely. The human fleet was waiting for them. Not just the military vessels. Every ship humanity possessed. Cargo haulers with welded-on weapons. Mining ships with drill lasers pointed outward. Passenger transports filled with volunteers. 200 ships of every size and shape, arranged in a wall between the hegemony and the remembrance. And they were not alone. Behind the human fleet, more ships were arriving. Ships that did not belong to any military. Ships from species that the hegemony had never considered allies, the Olati trade fleet. 50 merchant vessels, unarmed but present, flying alongside humans. The Brenny refugee convoy. 30 ships carrying survivors of a disaster the hegemony had ignored, survivors that humans had fed and sheltered. The Soltari science expedition. A dozen research vessels crewed by scientists the hegemony had tried to silence, scientists that humans had given sanctuary. More were coming. Every minute, more ships appeared. Small kindnesses, forgotten gestures, hands extended across the void. Now returning, the hegemony battle group commander stared at his sensors in disbelief. What is happening? He demanded. His tactical officer's voice was shaky. Sir, we are receiving transmissions from the arriving vessels. They are all saying the same thing. What are they saying? The officer swallowed. They are saying, we remember too. Admiral Yusuf Osei stood on the bridge of the Endurance, watching the hegemony battle group through his viewport. 20 warships, any one of which could have destroyed his entire fleet a week ago. But it was not a week ago.it was today. And today, the galaxy was watching. Open a channel, he said quietly. All frequencies, every species, every world. I want everyone to hear this. His communications officer hesitated. Sir, that will broadcast to the entire galactic network. Billions of beings will receive this transmission. Good. Osei straightened his uniform. That is exactly what I want. The channel opened. 100,000 receivers across 1,000 worlds locked onto the signal. On trading stations and colony worlds, in royal courts, and humble homes, beings of every species stopped what they were doing to listen. This is Admiral Yusuf Osei of the human fleet. I am speaking to Coordinator Vrel of the hegemony, and to every being in this galaxy who has ears to hear. He paused, gathering his thoughts. 40 years ago, humanity was dying. 12 of our colony worlds had failed. Our crops were dead. Our children were starving. We sent messages to every species we could reach, begging for help, begging for food, begging for anything. His voice hardened. The hegemony received our messages. They debated our case in their hall of coordination. And then they invoked something called non-interference protocols. They decided that our death was not their concern. He looked directly into the camera. Other species received our messages too. They sent their condolences. They expressed their sympathy. And then they went back to their lives while human children starved. The bridge was silent. Every officer was watching their admiral, hearing the pain in his voice that 40 years had not erased. But then the Mirati came. Osei's expression shifted. Something soft entered his eyes. Something like reverence. The Mirati were already dying. Their species was fading. They had barely enough ships to keep themselves alive. And yet, when they heard our calls, they did not debate. They did not invoke protocols. They came. He held up a photograph. It was old, faded, showing a group of silver-skinned beings standing beside a group of thin, desperate humans. They gave us their agricultural ships, the ships that grew their own food. They gave us their seed vaults, the genetic heritage of their entire species. They gave us their medical technology, the knowledge that kept their own people alive. His voice cracked slightly. They fed our children with food meant for their children. They healed our sick with medicine meant for their sick. They gave away everything they had, knowing it would accelerate their own extinction. And when we asked them why, they said only this, because it was the right thing to do. Osei set the photograph down. They asked us for one thing in return. One single thing. They said, "Remember us kindly." He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. We remember. We remember every Mirati face, every Mirati name, every Mirati hero who chose strangers over survival. We named our ships after them. We built schools in their honor. We taught our children their songs and their stories. We kept their memory alive because they kept us alive. He turned to face Coordinator Vrel's image directly. And now you come here, to this place, to take the last of them. A child, a little girl whose parents put her in stasis 40 years ago, hoping that someone would find her, someone who would remember. His voice rose. You call her salvage. You call her biological material. You say she has no value because her people are extinct. He stepped closer to the camera. Let me tell you what humans call her. We call her family. We call her hope. We call her the reason we became better than we were. She is not salvage. She is sacred. She is the daughter of the people who saved us when no one else would. Osei straightened to his full height. You want to take her? Then come and take her. Bring your warships. Bring your weapons. Bring everything the hegemony has. We will be waiting. He pointed at the fleet behind him. Human ships and Olati traders and Brenny refugees and Soltari scientists and dozens of other species, all standing together. But understand this, we will not stop. We will not surrender. We will not forget. And we will never, ever forgive. He lowered his hand. The Mirati showed us what it means to be kind. They showed us what it means to sacrifice for strangers. They showed us that the galaxy does not have to be cold and cruel and selfish. It can be better. We can be better. His final words were quiet but absolute. We are the children of the Mirati's mercy, and we will not abandon their child. The transmission ended. Silence spread across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, beings stared at their screens, processing what they had just heard. And then, slowly, ships began to move. Point 1 here. 2 there. A merchant vessel that had once been saved by human doctors. A military ship whose captain remembered human aid during a plague. A transport whose passengers had been welcomed to human worlds when their own had turned them away. They came from everywhere. Species the hegemony had never worried about. Species that had been helped by humans in small ways, forgotten ways, ways that the hegemony had never noticed. The hegemony battle group watched in disbelief as the fleet around them grew. 200 ships became 300. 300 became 500. 500 became more. All of them saying the same thing. All of them remembering. Coordinator Vrel stared at his tactical display and understood Finally, what he was facing, this was not a military conflict. This was a reckoning. The numbers on Coordinator Vrel's tactical display were impossible. When his battle group had arrived, they had faced 200 enemy vessels. Civilian ships, mostly, mining haulers, cargo transports, a handful of military cruisers that posed no real threat. Now, 6 hours later, his 20 warships were surrounded by over 700. They kept coming. Every few minutes, another ship would emerge from hyperspace and take position in the growing fleet. Olati traders with their silver hulls. Brenny refugee ships, scarred and patched, but flying proud. Soltari research vessels bristling with sensors. Species Vrel had never even heard of, species from the far edges of explored space, species that should have had no reason to care about humans or Mirati or anything the hegemony did. But they came anyway, and every single one of them was broadcasting the same message. We remember. Vrel opened a channel to Sethan Prime with shaking hands. The 12 coordinators appeared on a screen, their faces tight with concern. This was supposed to be a simple enforcement action, a minor species defying salvage law. It should have been resolved in hours. Instead, it had become a crisis. What is happening? Coordinator first demanded. Why have you not taken a child? I am outnumbered 7-1, Vrel replied. And the number grows every hour. If I attack now, I will be destroyed. Then wait for reinforcements. We will send another battle group. I do not believe reinforcements will help. Vrel's voice was hollow. This is not a military engagement. This is a political collapse. He shared his sensor data with the Council. 700 ships from dozens of species, all unified against the hegemony, all standing with humans, all remembering kindnesses that the hegemony had never tracked, never measured, never understood. The Brenny had been refugees once. Homeless, desperate. The hegemony had classified them as economic migrants and closed its borders. Humans had opened theirs. Humans had fed them, housed them, given them work and purpose. The Soltari had been scientists once, researching technologies that the hegemony deemed dangerous. They had been threatened with imprisonment. Humans had given them sanctuary. Humans had funded their research. Humans had treated them as colleagues, not criminals. The Olati had been traitors caught between hegemony regulations and economic survival. Humans had been fair partners. Humans had honored contracts. Humans had treated them as equals rather than subordinates. Every species in that fleet had a story, a moment when humans had helped them, a kindness received, a debt remembered, and now those debts were being repaid. This is impossible. Coordinator Drath sputtered. These species have no military alliances. They have no unified command. They cannot coordinate an effective defense. They do not need to, Coordinator Mirren said quietly. All eyes turned to her. They're not here to fight. They're here to witness. If you attack now, if you fire on this fleet, you will not be attacking humans alone. You will be attacking every species that humans have ever helped. She gestured at the sensor data. The Brenny will tell their story. The Soltari will tell theirs. The Olati will share what they have seen. And every species in the galaxy will learn that the hegemony attacked a child. The last survivor of a race that gave everything to save strangers. A race that asked only to be remembered kindly. Her silver eyes were cold. You wanted to teach humans their place. Instead, you have taught the galaxy what you truly are. Cold, cruel, indifferent to kindness, indifferent to mercy, indifferent to everything except power. She stood. I am withdrawing the Olati from this engagement. We will not fire on humans. We will not be part of this. One by one, other representatives rose. The Brenny ambassador declared that his people would stand with humanity forever. The Soltari representative announced that his species would share all their research with humans, free of charge, effective immediately. Even species that had no ships in the fleet began sending messages. Condemnations of the hegemony. Expressions of support for humans. Declarations that kindness, not power, was the true measure of civilization. The hegemony was not just losing a military standoff. It was losing its authority, its legitimacy, its very reason for existing. Coordinator first raised a hand for silence. Withdraw, he said. Vrel blinked. Coordinator, Withdraw your battle group. Immediately, concede the child to human custody. Issue a formal apology for our actions. But the precedent has already been set. Coordinator First's voice was heavy with defeat. We have learned what happens when you oppose those who remember kindness. We will not make this mistake again. Vrel nodded slowly. Then he opened a channel to the human fleet. Admiral Osei, the hegemony concedes this engagement. The child will remain in human custody. We are withdrawing. Osei's face showed no triumph, no satisfaction, only quiet resolve. Thank you, Coordinator. The Mirati would be glad to know that reason still exists in this galaxy. The hegemony ships turned and left, and aboard the Remembrance, in a small medical bay protected by 3 backup power systems, a Mirati child named Suri opened her eyes for the first time in 40 years. She did not understand where she was. She did not recognize the faces around her. She did not know what had happened to her parents, her people, her world. But a gentle woman with gray hair and kind eyes took her hand and said something that she would remember for the rest of her life. Your people saved us once. Now we're going to take care of you. Suri did not understand the words, but she understood the kindness. 5 years had passed since the standoff. The galaxy had changed. The hegemony still existed, but its power had cracked. Species that had once obeyed without question now demanded negotiation. Treaties that had been imposed were being rewritten. The cold, cruel order that had ruled for centuries was slowly giving way to something else, something that had a name. The Compact of Remembrance had formed within months of the crisis. Its founding members were the species that had stood with humanity that day. The Olati traders, the Brenny refugees, the Soltari scientists, dozens of others who had remembered kindnesses given, debts owed, hands extended across the void. The Compact had one principle above all others. Kindness was sacred. Those who showed mercy would receive mercy. Those who helped strangers would find help when they needed it. Those who remembered would be remembered and turned at IT was a simple idea. And it was changing everything. Suri stood at the entrance of the Mirati Memorial Garden, watching the morning sun rise over Earth. She was 13 years old now, tall for her age, her silver skin glowing faintly in the light. Her arms held her ceremonial robe, closed against the cool breeze. She had lived among humans for 5 years. She spoke their languages. She knew their customs. She had attended their schools, played with their children, learned their songs and their stories. And yet she had never stopped being Mirati, because the humans would not let her forget. Every year, on the anniversary of the colony collapse, humans gathered to honor the Mirati. They sang Mirati songs. They spoke Mirati words. They told the story of how a dying race had saved them and how they had promised to remember. Today was that anniversary, and Suri had been asked to speak. Ambassador Lin stood beside her, the old diplomat's face lined with years of service. She had been one of the first to welcome Suri to Earth. She had helped her learn, helped her grow, helped her understand what her people's sacrifice had meant. Are you ready? Lin asked softly. Suri looked out at the garden. 12 million names were carved into white stone walls that stretched as far as she could see. Every human saved by Mirati intervention. Every life that her people had preserved. New sections had been added since the Compact's founding. Names of Brenny saved by Olati medicine. Names of Soltari rescued by human ships. Names of species helping species. Strangers saving strangers. Kindness spreading across the stars. I am ready, Suri said. She walked to the podium at the center of the garden. Billions were watching. Every world in the Compact. Every ship in the fleet. Every being who had chosen to remember. She looked at the names on the walls. Then she looked at the crowd. Humans and Olati and Brenny and Soltari and 100 other species, all standing together, all waiting for her words. My parents put me in stasis 40 years ago, she began. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying across the garden. They knew they were dying. They knew their people were dying. They could have used their resources to save themselves. Instead, they gave everything they had to help strangers. She paused. I have read their journals. I have watched their recordings. I have tried to understand why they made that choice. Why they chose your children over their own. Her four hands gripped the podium. They did not do it because they expected something in return. They did not do it because they thought you would remember. They did it because they saw suffering and they could not look away. They saw children starving and they could not eat while others died. They saw a species in pain and they felt that pain as their own. Suri's voice softened. They did it because it was right, not because it was wise, not because it was logical, because it was right. She looked at Ambassador Lin, at the human children who had become her friends, at the vast, impossible family that had welcomed her into its arms. My people are gone. I'm the last Mirati. I will never see my parents again. I will never hear my mother's voice or feel my father's embrace. Tears formed in her silver eyes. But I'm not alone. I have never been alone. Because you remember. Because you kept your promise. Because you taught your children to sing our songs and speak our words and honor our memory. She smiled through her tears. The Mirati are gone, but the kindness they gave lives on. It lives in every human who helps a stranger. It lives in every species that extends a hand. It lives in this compact, in this garden, in the hearts of beings across the galaxy who have chosen to remember. Suri placed her hand against the nearest wall, feeling the carved names beneath her fingers. My parents did not change the galaxy because they tried to change it. They changed it because they were kind. That is the lesson they taught. That is the legacy they left. She turned back to the crowd. Be kind. Remember those who help you. Repay the debts that matter. And when you see someone suffering, do not look away. Her final words were a whisper that somehow reached every ear. That is how the Mirati live on. Not in my blood. In yours. The garden was silent. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise. A melody. A Mirati lullaby, sung in 100 languages, by 1,000 species, by billions of voices across the stars. The Mirati were gone. But they would never be forgotten, and humanity would spend eternity proving it.